Welcome, everybody. This is absolutely amazing to see so many of you here, and I feel deeply honoured that you've taken the time out to listen to and discuss mother-daughter attachment needs. As I said, I am recording this, so just so that you're aware that, you know, in terms of what you say about confidentiality, etc. If you haven't, could you, because there's a lot of you, could you mute yourselves, and then if you want to say something, just unmute yourselves again, because otherwise we're going to have a lot of background noise, because I don't know how many people are going to be on this talk, but 47 people wanted to come on this talk, so we could potentially have that many. So that's why I think muting your microphone is a great idea.
Also, if people, to unmute, if they wanted to ask a question or something, you just have to hit the space bar and hold it down. And then as soon as you take your finger off, it'll mute you again.
Oh, I didn't know that. Thank you. Cool. So just hit the space bar, hold it down, say, and I do like to have interaction. So I'll be asking, you know, every 5 minutes if there's anything you want to, any questions, rather than leaving it all to the end, which of course, you know, we can have questions at the end, but, you know, sometimes it's better to talk about it when we are talking about it. Okay, so let me introduce myself, because some of you guys know me, but I think there's a lot of people here I have not met before. So I'm Rosjke Hasseldine. I'm a New Zealander, and my degree in counselling is from Indiana University. I lived in England after I graduated in 1997. That's a while ago. I lived for 14 years in England, mostly in Nottingham and then in Bedford. And then 8 years ago, I came to America, and I now live in New Hampshire. So I'm the author of 2 books, The Mother-Daughter Puzzle and The Silent Female Scream. I blog on mother-daughter attachment for the American Counselling Association. 2 years ago, I organised a panel and I talked for the United Nations Commission for the Status of Women, and it was the first time. Do you believe this? I mean, it's shocking, really. It was the first time that mother-daughters were talked about at the Commission of Status of Women. Mother-daughter relationship is missing too often from the conversation. And last year I had a really exciting time. I went to Ottawa and spoke about my work on TV, which was both nerve-wracking, but because it was live, and but it was fun. It was great. I also teach the Mother-Daughter Attachment training course, which is an online course, and graduates are listed on a referral page, sort of the motherdaughtercoach.com, find a coach, so that there is a place not only where you can find clients, but where mothers and daughters can find the help that they need. So we're going to cover 5 topics. So what are mother-daughter attachment needs? Why the increase in demand for help at this time? And there has been an increase since COVID from mothers and daughters needing help. What is mother-daughter attachment? What causes mother-daughter attachment disruption? And mother-daughter attachment and silencing, self-neglecting, and self-effacing behaviour. And there is an absolute direct link between those 2. So what are mother-daughter attachment needs? So when I started working with mothers and daughters in 1997, the concept that mothers and daughters have attachment needs just wasn't part of the conversation. Hands up anyone who actually had training on the mother-daughter relationship in their counselling or marriage and family or coaching training. Anyone? Yeah, no. Yeah, it's sadly missing, and I'm on a mission to try and get it included, because it really does need to be included. Because if mother-daughter attachment missing, actually so are women are missing, because the mother-daughter relationship, it tells the story of women's lives, and that's how powerful this is. So when I started, I had to also, mothers and daughters, couples therapy was more about, sexual relationships. So I had to actually educate mothers and daughters that their relationship was worth going to see a therapist for, and that actually there needed to be a space where they could talk about their relationship and understand what's going on and heal what's going on, or heal their conflict or their attachment disruption. So let me see if I'll just share screen. Right. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. There you go. So can you all see that, mother and daughter? I'm assuming you all can. So yeah, have a look at this mother-daughter couple. I'll stop sharing screen in a second. Think about what might be going on between these two. They look connected, are they? What about needs? Whose needs are being met in this relationship? So just stop. There you go. So any thoughts? What do you think might be going on in this relationship? Do they look like they're connected?
Mom looks very connected to daughter. You can't tell with daughter.
The mother looks very connected to the daughter. Did the daughter look connected to mom? Possibly.
I thought so.
Yeah. You see, the thing is, what on the surface here, because they do look on the surface to be quite connected, but there is a whole lot going underneath it. In terms of, for example, whose needs are getting met? Because this is a mother and adult daughter. And most of the clients I see are mothers and adult daughters. So whose needs are being met in this relationship?
The mothers.
Yeah, it could be.
Well, I was thinking that both, to a certain extent, when I noticed their hands, one had their hand over, one hand was over the mother's hand on one side and was under the mother's hand in the other side.
So there could be a more mutuality there?
Yes, that's what I was thinking.
Excellent. Yes, there could be. And that's the thing, in terms of mothers and adult daughters, there needs to be more of a mutuality here. So because if the mother's needs are paramount, and there's a whole lot of reasons why that might be happening, then in a sense, what happens to the daughter's needs?
Yes.
And that's what I call, and I write about and teach about, is the river of nurturing flowing backwards from daughters to mothers, and the mother, and that's a generational pattern, from the mother to the grandmother. And what happens in why that is happening, because this is a family where women's needs are not talked about, not inquired after. They literally don't exist. It's like a conversation is entirely missing. And that is disastrous for mothers and daughters. But it can look like that mother-daughter couple because the daughter is desperate to make sure mum's okay. It is her job in that family to make sure mum's okay. And for her, sometimes, if mum's okay, she's okay. The trouble is, every time she's checking out if mum's okay, she's not checking in, am I okay? And what do I need? And what could happen in a situation like that is that when she has a daughter, the same dynamic will happen. Daughters are responsible for mum's needs. And mothers and daughters argue over when women's needs are not met. They fight over whose needs get to be met because they don't have a concept of both women's needs just get met when women are not emotionally supported. They fight over who gets to be emotionally supported because they don't have a concept that women can expect to be emotionally supported. And gender roles. When limiting gender roles limit women's power and limit women's choices, mothers and daughters are set up to fight over their limiting choices and their limiting power, and mothers often get in the neck, get blamed for that, when in fact it's a family-wide system, it's a generational system, and it's a society issue. So what is actually a societal issue or a family's issue actually plays out, and that's where the power of the mother-daughter relationship is, where mothers and daughters tell the story, that relationship, the attachment between the two, or the lack of attachment, tells us a much bigger story of what's going on for women within that family, generationally, and within society. So when I started working with mothers and daughters, I didn't have any clue about this. And, I was drawing, genograms and stuff, using the tools that I'd been told to use or taught to use. And I realized actually that they weren't working in the way that I needed them to work. They weren't digging below the surface. I want to read you, I'm writing a new book called the Mother-Daughter Attachment Workbook, which for therapists and for mothers and daughters to use. I just want to read you some of the things that I was pondering back then that I knew had to be answered in order to understand and to really dig below what was going on the surface and why a mother and daughter were arguing. So what I'm writing at the moment is, if attachment is about feeling seen and known, how can a mother and daughter feel seen and known by each other when historically women have been silenced and shamed for speaking up, and still women today have to fight to be heard, as the Me Too movement and Believe Her movement show. So how can mothers and daughters talk about what they truly feel and need when women must prioritize other people's needs? We still have a gender role expectation that women put other people before themselves, and mothers are supposed to be selfless, sacrificing, and self-neglecting. That selfless mothering is disastrous for the mother-daughter relationship. It's disastrous for the mother, and it's disastrous for the mother-daughter relationship. And it's absolutely unpacking that is essential work in understanding what happens between mothers and daughters. So how can a mother emotionally support her daughter when she's not been emotionally supported herself, and the grandmother has not been emotionally supported? They won't have a language that speaks about how women ask for and receive emotional support. So that language would be missing in their relationship. Hence, they're set up for conflict. How can a daughter understand who a mother is as a person and the reality in which she is trying to mother when a mother does not exist as a person? The mother's subjectivity is still missing in many of our human development theories. I think attachment theory, it's missing too much. And within society. And how can a mother and daughter feel good about their shared femaleness when femininity is treated as inferior to masculinity and women prioritize men's needs over their own? It's interesting for me how many times I meet with clients where when they start talking and they unpack what's been going on, they map their mother-daughter history, which is one of the exercises of the mother-daughter attachment model. And in my book, The Mother-Daughter Puzzle, I have detailed instructions to it, and I also teach this in the course on how to do this. But they see that women in the family, generationally, And if you think about it, our mother's generation, our grandmother's generation, they were taught to prioritize men over women. And that gets passed down as a norm that nobody questions. And finally, how can adolescent daughters strengthen her attachment to a mother when human development theorists, and most of them are men, tell her that in order to mature into an emotionally balanced adult, she must separate from her mother, and that needing connection is feminine and therefore weak. Carol Gilligan is one of them, Jean Baker Miller. These theorists really challenge the idea of needing to separate. And what I've seen is that actually mothers and daughters can grow into well-balanced adults. Absolutely. And they need to grow into being themselves through connection. Connection, this idea of separating is, I think, flawed for mothers and daughters. And maybe it's flawed for human beings. I don't know. So let me pause here. Any questions, any thoughts at this point?
I'd like to talk about emotional needs of daughters and the societal expectation that daughters will care for their mothers. So that when mothers age and they get to nursing home age,
yes,
it's usually always the daughter that finds herself in the situation of either caring for an aging mother or being the one who's going to make the arrangements for care for the mother or leave her job, or the caretaking is generally always it's always usually the woman that usually it's the mom or the daughter.
Yeah, well, it started with the mom. Yeah, you're right. It started with
always. And honestly, I don't know how that's ever going to change. I mean, I think it should. It needs to, because I think so many women have burned out and gotten sick themselves. And I know from my experience with my own situation, I used to talk to other women and they'd say, you know what, my mother's really sick and I'm going down too. I'm not going to be able to work or do anything or take care of myself because I'm doing this. I'm taking care of my mother.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is a really important point, and it actually relates to why there's such an increase. So I'm going to address what you're saying, but I also want to weave in why there's such an increase in conflict and need for support and help for mothers and daughters at the moment, because of the fact, not only because they're spending, if they're living in the same house, they're spending more time together. There's also the fear of loss. And like myself, my daughter's in England, the anxiety around that. But it's what you're pointing out is what I call the culture of female service, which is so normalized. We don't even realize how often we're acting within this belief system that women are, yes, we are talking about patriarchy here. Somebody just asked that. Yeah, it's a patriarchal concept, but it's so normalized that women are the caregivers in the world. And right now, with kids being home, the caregiving is so much more intense for women. And I think that's also, again, that's playing out with mothers and daughters. And I do think it needs to change. But it is, I do see that. And I say to my adult daughters who have way too much responsibility for, say, taking care of an elderly parent, you bill your brothers, you bill your cousins, you bill other people for the time that you're putting in, so that at least there's some value put on all you are doing. And I think women and men, because men are very important in changing this as well, we need to, and as therapists, support men and women, women to set boundaries and say no, and make it okay that women say no. Because it isn't actually okay we still have a cultural, that's part of the cultural female service, a cultural expectation that women will put themselves last and put everybody else first. And that gets, again, that will get played out in the mother-daughter relationship.
Can I ask about individuation? When you said that, that you were saying that, were you saying that that's not something that they should do?
No, they should absolutely individuate. Absolutely.
They should. Okay.
But
okay.
in relationship. You see,
Right.
because the concept of what do I need and how do I feel, i.e. growing into having my own voice.
Right.
If mothers can do that together, they in a way can coach each other. And they normalize and grow a conversation that women say, I need, I feel, I desire.
So you're saying we should encourage individuation as far as encouraging daughters to express what their needs are.
Absolutely. Right from the beginning. But so should the mother. And that's the thing, that I've identified 8 stages in the mother-daughter relationship, because it's from when the daughter is born and number 8 is when the mother dies. But actually, I think it continues. But these are just 8 stages. When the daughter is born, daughter's adolescent, daughter leaves home, daughter gets married, daughter has a baby, biggie. That's often when a therapist is found. Mother goes through menopause. Mother is elderly and the mother dies. The thing is, though, what's happening today in terms of the increased needs, the issues that are being brought up have always been there. They've just been magnified by the COVID disease that we've got, virus that we've got going on. Because each of these stages are actually opportunities for change. And transitioning through each of these stages means that the cracks that are in the relationship and the issues that have sort of been bubbling along on the surface and sort of been managed, sort of come to the surface and demanding attention. So in terms of your question about a daughter needs, and all women deserve from the moment they've been born to be taught to say what they need. But mothers' needs are paramount too. Because a daughter needs to watch her mother say, I need, I feel, I desire, I care about, I want. Because by watching mum, she will learn it herself. And about when the daughter was about, I think, 1920, sort of that college years transition, a mother-daughter relationship needs to be more mutual. There needs to be a mutual support where it isn't just about the daughter's needs, because the mum's needs are there as well. So I hear a lot of women, and it's not just with elderly mums, but mothers and the daughters wanting the mum to babysit and be ever available. How does that work out? Should a mother, in the cultural female service, the mother should be saying yes and ever available for the daughter. But actually, mum is a person and she has a life of her own too. So then, in a sense, there is some conflict in terms of also the daughter recognizing that mum is a person in her own right. Any other thoughts? I can see that I've jumped around all my topics, which is exactly what usually happens. Any other questions that you have or thoughts?
Yes, I have a question.
Okay.
It sounds, I'm a couple therapist, and I see, same-sex and mixed-sex couples, and also mother-daughter, dad and son couples, I would say. I call them dyads, right? It sounds that it's very, I don't know, I'm from France, but I see it's very globalized, or westernized, this idea of relationship.
Yes.
how they are fighting for their individuation outside of the relationship instead of being within the relationship and still have their freedom.
Yes, I think you said it beautifully. It is about fighting for your personhood, your right, and freedom within the relationship, rather than having to be feeling like you've got to go outside a relationship.
Exactly.
And then to come back. Exactly.
Yeah, and so I'm from France, but I'm also from the Caribbean, and I have African descent. So for me, is where I see the clash or the gap. I live in Miami, in the U.S., and I can see it in the sessions that they have no idea how to be together, and don't accept that actually conflict is good. It's something that we need to know how to do it in the most appropriate way in order to evolve, not to die or to break up the relationship.
Yes. And that's one of the things that I teach in the course is that it's an exercise called stand in your shoes or her shoes, so that mothers and daughters can learn to not only stand in their own shoes and be able to communicate on what it's like to be in our own shoes, but to also understand what it's like if, say, I'm the daughter in mum's shoes or the mother in the daughter's shoes, i.e., which allows for a sense of we are each our own person, which means we can have wildly different beliefs and ideas about even reality in terms of what's going on, and both are equally valid, and both have needs. And yes, there may be a clash in terms of inconsistent needs, but that's where we work. We know how to work that out because we have, in a sense, we don't allow one or the other to say, your needs don't matter, mine are paramount. So yeah. And I think, so I started working with mothers and daughters online when Skype came into existence. I can't even remember when that was. Was that 12 years ago, 13 years ago? And that gave me, so I started working internationally then, and I was living in either Nottingham or Bedford at that time. And that helped me see actually the differences and cultural differences in terms of what's happening between mothers and daughters. But there's a couple of themes that keep coming up regardless of where the mother and daughter come from, and that's the silencing of women's needs. If I was to say one thing that really causes conflict is that women's needs, and I'm talking particularly emotional needs, many mothers and daughters don't even know what that is. The silencing of that is, and the more patriarchal the family or the culture, the worse it is in terms of that, the silencing of that, the understanding that women have needs of their own. And when I map their mother-daughter history, when you look at the daughter, the mother, and the grandmother, you can see the impact not only on the women themselves, but on their mother-daughter relationships of that silencing and how it's come about and the emotional relationship impact of that.
Does it change when, let's say, someone grows up without a mother, like the mother is not present and involved for some reason?
Well, I think you can have a number of things. Firstly, who becomes then if somebody grows up without a mother, who's the mother replacement? Who's the primary female? Is there a stepmom, or was the grandmother it? So often the dynamics get then between those two. But also if mum's not there, either dies or what have you, the eldest daughter then becomes the family mum sometimes. So it all lands on her. And often these dynamics between mothers and daughters land more heavily on the eldest daughter, regardless of whether the first daughter in the family, that's where it lands. Any other questions?
Well, I have some curiosities. So So I'm a couples therapist in
Mhm.
Atlanta, Georgia, and I work primarily, well, I use the emotionally focused therapy,
Yes,
and it is attachment based, and it
yes,
is all about our attachment longings as people, humans. We were created to be with another. And
yes.
so this notion of individuation, and whether or not we can have it separate from our romantic partners, our family of origin relationships, etc., is the work that you've been doing, has it, how is it rooted in this attachment framework that tell me a little bit more about your research, I guess, is a simpler way to ask my question.
Yes. Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I've been just reading one of her, Sue Johnson's articles, actually, and
yeah.
one about a mother-daughter relationship.
Mhm.
I think it's a wonderful, emotional focused therapy is brilliant. I do think there is a piece missing, and I think attachment theory has a piece missing.
Mhm.
And it is about understanding the mother's reality, the socio-cultural and the political environment that a mother is trying to mother in,
Mhm.
and understanding that she can only do what she is supported to do. So her limited mothering is limited by the resources that she's got.
Oh, for sure.
So if she doesn't have enough resources, then there is a ceiling right there on her potential in terms of how she can mother. And I think there is too much blame then attached to mothers, and not enough understanding of how she's not supported enough.
Mhm.
And I think gender role stereotypes, so looking at the generational experience of patriarchy and the gender role stereotypes that women have been taught to define themselves by, and that our mothers were expected to define themselves by, and our grandma, is absolutely an essential part in understanding mother-daughter attachment.
Mhm.
Because they define who women, how we think about ourselves, how we behave. And again, it's the needs, because historically and still today, women are not expected or not allowed to say, we need. I mean, if you look at it, an assertive woman is still not totally accepted. Well, a certain man, that's perfectly normal.
Mhm.
So that piece, understanding what's been going on generationally in the family for women, i.e. women's experience, that's how you understand what's going on between a mother and daughter. So does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So very briefly, what haven't I covered? I've sort of, just to summarize, what is mother-daughter attachment? It's the understanding of the underlying dynamics between mothers and daughters of all ages. So the mother-daughter relationship is understood as lifelong, but also multi-generational. It's a roadmap on how to dig below the arguments and uncover the underlying dynamics, and a roadmap for change. And it looks at women's generational history, especially women's emotional reality, emotional silencing, denied needs, restrictive gender roles. For example, if a mother is taught to be selfless and sacrificing, her daughter will likely inherit that, because it's a normalized behavior. She will be shamed within that family if the daughter behaves in a very it takes care of herself first, which will then silence her, and she will fit in with what's expected. And I see there's a real trend, and I think Me Too, it coincided with Me Too, so I think it's connected with daughters in their 20s and 30s and 40s bringing their mothers in, because they are terrified of being self-effacing and self-sacrificing like their mum is, and they want mum in, and there's the attachment need. They want mum to change it with her. Daughters want their mum's support to change these sort of behavior traits that they've been taught to live by.
Can I add something?
Yes.
It's beautiful what you said, because I finished my PhD in marriage and family therapy last year, but I was working on, thank you. I was working on a sexual mass trauma that is passed down from one generation to another. And what I noticed is also because they want to fight and be different from their mothers. So I noticed that the millennium generations are more about hooking up, which is like the opposite of, of being at the service. They think, I mean, it's not the opposite really, because really hooking up is like ending up with a guy and or what have you, and having sex freely, and it's actually disrespecting and very it's another form of sexual violence that young women are accepting now without knowing. And reading through the literature, what I found out was that actually it's more prevalent and accepted in different races, white versus minority young people. So it's incredible what we're doing when we don't really give ourselves access, open access to our children, our daughters, but also our boys who have to learn how to be men.
Absolutely. And I think there's a huge need for that. Absolutely. I think it would be interesting to find out how young girls' dating behavior changes in a family where they're taught to say what they need, that they absolutely feel listened to, and they expect a sort of mutuality in relationships. They see that happening between, adults and their parents and they themselves. And that's a sort of mother-daughter relationship, to see if that makes a difference.
Yes.
To that behavior, because their norm is, I expect to be heard. I expect to be, my needs, I expect them to be considered. Rather than what I see in young women is thinking that they fit in with the guy into his life, rather than actually still having a sense of self.
That's why the COVID is kind of a blessing in disguise for those young girls who just give themselves without really thinking, just to conform to the norm, which is out of norm.
Absolutely. So, guys, we've got 6 minutes left, so I just want to finish. So, the selflessness and sacrifice leads to emotional starvation, which again, I think is a huge dynamic between mothers and daughters. And again, it's a generational dynamic where women are starving hungry to be listened to and supported. And if mum is, then who? It's like going back to that picture of the mother-daughter. Who is the first person that's then supposed to meet mum's unspoken needs? It's the daughter. And that's when the river of nurturing can flow backwards. And another dynamic which I write about and teach about is payback mothers and mothers-in-laws. In certain cultures, particularly Pakistani and Indian cultures, there's a huge problem between mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law, and it's often a payback issue, where women, if a mother has given all her life and not had enough given to her, by the time she gets about 60 or 70, she's like, I am done. And then turns to the daughter or the daughter-in-law to be taken care of, which fits with the question we had earlier on in terms of what do daughters then do when the mum gets elderly. And so the daughter and the daughter-in-law are then supposed to take care of mum's needs, which of course will then just make her the next payback mum. And again, the daughter's needs are not heard, but neither are the mother's actually. So nobody's needs get met in that sort of scenario. Right, so what else are we going to... I think I pretty much covered it, you know, so we've got 5 minutes left. Any questions that you have?
I'd like to ask
Yeah.
something. So I'm working with an 18-year-old right now who's having issues with her mother.
Right.
And I was talking, and there's these unspoken expectations, but now I'm learning it sounds like there's probably these unspoken needs between the two of them.
Yes.
Right.
That's where I would go. Yeah.
Okay. And so in encouraging her to express her needs to her mother as far as individuation and everything, also then I should be asking her to find out what her mother's needs are. I mean, do you think that's a way of?
Well, absolutely. Yes. And look at grandma. How, again, so it's the mother-daughter history mapping here. Mm-hmm. How did needs or how did women's needs get silenced in the family?
Okay. So bring up the issue of women's needs getting silenced throughout the family.
Sorry, say that again.
Bring up the issue of women's needs being silenced through the family and educate her about that.
Yes, I would map her mother-daughter history. So get the mother-daughter puzzle and it has the instructions in it on how to do that. So you can actually map out what's been going on for women. And so it's the emotional reality of women. And actually when daughters see that, it's like, it's not just me. Mm-hmm. It actually depersonalizes it. Even though it's very personal, it actually depersonalizes it. And they see that actually there's a much bigger context. And it grows empathy. Because in a sense, they see what I'm experiencing, mum experiencing, grandma experiencing. We're in a sense in the same boat here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because otherwise it just feels frustrating. Like I'm supposed to be all this for you, my mother, and I don't want to do that, but then I feel guilty about that. And so it's...
And that dynamic happens a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes. And if that dynamic happens, then we do, we have a system where women, if daughters are feeling that, we have a family system where women's needs are not being heard.
Yeah. I mean, I felt that in my own relationship. So this is all very,
Yeah. Who hasn't actually?
Yeah.
Because look at it. I mean, my mother's generation, no clue that she had any needs or that she was a person outside. My grandmother, absolutely, very silent woman, absolutely no sense of that she had needs of her own. So this is why the 18-year-olds and the 20-year-olds and the 30-year-olds are wanting to change this. And it's absolute, to me, without changing this, women will never be fully equal. Because if you don't say what you need, how visible really are you? And I think when women say what they need, they're incredibly powerful. Like one of the things I write about is, a woman who knows what she needs can't be controlled. Which is why the mother-daughter relationship, I think, is marginalized because it is so incredibly powerful to change the reality. Let me just click on a few of the chats here. Right, is any other questions? Yeah, no. Yeah, I mean, this question, actually, yeah, it's true. I think the lockdown has put a spotlight, just like these different 8 stages, they put a spotlight on what is already here or what is already happening, which to me then provides an opportunity for change, for understanding, for connection, and for change.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So I'll very briefly talk about, so I teach this in an online course, 4 lessons. Next one's in June, and I think this one in October and November. And again, and graduates get listed on the Find a Coach page. And I'm fingers crossed. I think there's a few people from Bedford, England here. So I'm actually planning on teaching this yes. I lived very close to there. The person who just put that on the chat. I'm teaching it in person, hopefully next year, June. I'm really hoping that I will be able to get on a plane and go over to England and hopefully visit my daughter as well, and teach us in person in Bedford. So if you're in Bedford, you might want to hold out for that. So one more question before we finish. Anybody got any burning thoughts they want to say?
I have another question. So I was thinking about my own family dynamic. My grandmother was definitely someone who was always accessible, always, doing, giving to ad nauseum.
Yeah.
My mother, on the other hand, somehow learned the lesson that, that's not my ministry. So I'm going to go in a different direction. And there was some conflict there about my mother's independence and her desire to have her needs met. And naturally, she passed that on to me. And hopefully, I'm passing that on to my daughters. I only have girls, so we'll see. Cross fingers, toes, and eyes.
Mm-hmm.
But when working with I have a couple, two sisters who are both estranged from their mother. It's an interesting story about religious beliefs. So, but the one of them, they're very close in age. They're only like 13 months apart. But the older of the two did become more mother-like because this separation from mom happened younger.
Yeah, so one became the mother of the other.
Right. And so the younger one is more individualized, but she is the one who is reaching to connect with her sister.
Interesting, isn't it? If you're talking about, so the elder one, in a way, took on the mothering role, which I would have predicted.
Right.
The younger one has then more space to be themselves. Yet we've got a mother, sort of a copy of a mother-daughter, where the younger one wants to connect more.
Right.
And you see, in a sense, caregiving, I think, can be a hindrance sometimes with women.
Right.
To connection.
Right. Because
loss of self.
Their story is fascinating. Because just a lot went on in their life, but the older one has always felt this need to protect the younger daughter who was wanting to reach out, explore her world, things like that. So what has happened is in the last couple of years, the two sisters have essentially stopped talking to each other. And so what would be I don't know, kind of the vessel to help them, because they're sisters. They are mother-daughter.
Well, again, I would map their mother-daughter history and just do one as the daughter, which probably doesn't matter which, or do them both. Do one with one and do the other, and see the differences between their perception and what's the similarity between one's idea of what's happened with mom and grandma and the other one. Okay. And again, look at themes, because either mothers and daughters, but I think sisters, women fight when they're not being heard, and to fight to be heard. Yeah, they fight for connection. And the connection means me. I need to be known. There's an equation I write about, being heard and being understood equals feeling loved. And I think it's absolutely for mothers and daughters. But I think it's for women generally. I think it's for people generally. So they fight to be heard, fight to be understood, i.e. what it's like to be in my shoes. And I want to know what it's like to be in your shoes. And I think, I don't know about these two sisters, but I know that mothers and daughters, daughters want to know mum as a person. The grief I hear from daughters when I ask her, tell me who your mum was if mum's passed away as a person, and they can't answer that question, which is very, very common. And the grief they feel at not having known their mum outside of her mothering role. Caring is great. We all know, we could do with more caregiving in this world. But for women, it is way out of balance. And women need to, and men have a huge role here.
Mm-hmm.
The balance needs to be redressed so that women's needs rise to the front more.
So are you
Okay,
saying,
guys.
So are you saying we should encourage like these daughters to then get to know their mother outside of
Yes.
the mother? Like, who were you
Who
like
is she?
before?
Yes. I give homework. Tell a story about what it was like when you were 18, when you were 20. Absolutely. Yeah. Daughters want that.
Mm-hmm.
Because if mum is allowed to be a person, so is she. I remember thinking at 16, I thought I could see, mum was like, do well in school, go to college, blah, blah, blah. I was told all that. And then it was get married, have kids. And I remember thinking at 16, it's like, okay, so I'm allowed to have a bit of a life now, but then I get married and have kids, and then my life that's it? Is that it? Because that's how my mother acted, that's how my grandmother. There was nothing outside of that caregiving role. And I remember thinking at 16, I didn't want to borrow that. So I think, yeah, which is a good thing for young women to sort of wake up to. It's a sad reality, but it's good to be waking up to. Okay, guys, we have now gone over time.
Over time.
No worries. So, well, thank you so much for taking the time to join in this talk, in this discussion. If you want to sign up to my newsletter, do that on either Rosjke.com, that's the best one. Mm-hmm. And stay safe, stay well, and hope to meet some of you guys. Okay, take care.
Thank you so
much.
much.
Bye.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.